Welcome back. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. As you know, the World Economic Forum on Africa begins in a couple of weeks from now, less than 3 weeks from now, actually. And this year, the theme is on forging inclusive growth, creating jobs. And of course, this is the first time that Nigeria is hosting this event. It is the 24th edition, and it is a good time for Nigeria. We're definitely in the spotlight in a positive way. Now, in the last couple of days, we've been talking about some key sectors and looking at what role they can play in terms of looking at the theme and how they can work with it, how they can develop it, and how they can move with it. So today on the program, our focus is shifting to another key sector, the real sector that is, the micro, small and medium enterprises. So how can forging inclusive growth help? What role can the MSMEs play in this? Is there a place for them in forging inclusive growth? Of course, we know that they are supposed to be the major drivers of the economy, but we're going to be talking about that in the next couple of minutes. And I'm being joined on the program by two gentlemen, both of them SME practitioners. To my immediate left is Tosin Ukoji. He's the Chief Executive Officer Total Ascent, and to my far left is Uzo Nduka. He's an innovation and business expert. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for coming in this morning.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, the World Economic Forum is coming up, in a couple of weeks from now, and is looking at the theme is forging inclusive growth and creating jobs. What is the place of MSMEs in all of this? Do they have a place in it?
Definitely, I think SMEs have a huge role to play in terms of driving the sort of inclusive growth and job creation. Just to give you a bit of perspective, we've got about 17 million SMEs or MSMEs, as they may be called, in Nigeria. If we can put in place the right sort of framework to impact just 10% of that, in a situation where, for example, each one of those businesses could create one additional job, we're looking at 1.7, almost 2 million jobs. If there's anything that can contribute to inclusive growth and job creation, it's actually being able to kickstart that engine that is SMEs.
Yeah. But you see, in the last couple of months, last couple of years, let me just say, we've seen strong policy movement in terms of trying to give this SMEs kind of direction in terms of policies that have been put in place, in terms of the ability of being able to, implement, at least if not all the way, at least to a certain extent. And so it seems that there's this argument that people are saying that even as welfare is coming to Nigeria, it seems as if there's no place for MSMEs. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I don't quite agree with that view. I think that there is a major role for the micro, small and medium enterprises in this whole debate and conversation. I don't see how any nation is going to have a robust and sustainable economy if the MSMEs are not there at the mid-level of the economic strata. That's where they belong. That's where 70%, sometimes more, of the jobs are created and must be maintained. It's also not just about creating jobs. It is important for us to make sure that the existing SMEs are not losing jobs. They must not lose. The man in the corner shop that employs 2 people, we must do everything possible to see that that business doesn't collapse. Because if it does, 2 people are back in the labor market. And each time you have 2 people from a small company going back into the labor market, multiply that by maybe 10 million, 17 million, then you find out what the grave consequences of not making sure SMEs are involved in a process like this are.
But then, okay, you want to add to that?
I was going to add to that. I think part of the opportunity is that SMEs need to have a seat at the table. Just looking through the World Economic Forum and what's going on in Abuja next month, I don't see that level of participation from SMEs. The voice of the SME is a critical piece in determining what sort of policies are put in place and what sort of enabling environment goes into ensuring that we don't lose people and we continue to facilitate the growth of those organizations as part of that engine for growth of the economy.
Well, it's good that you mentioned that because some SMEs, especially from the organized private sector, have complained about the fact that they've not been given any form of showing themselves or airing their voice, or even getting to let other people understand what this forum is really all about. It seems as if they're concentrating mostly on the medium to large scale corporates and leaving them totally out, and so they're quite aggrieved about it.
I fully agree. I would say it's a huge opportunity. Obviously, the focus is inclusive growth. You can't have inclusive growth without the MSMEs being involved. And job creation, the sort of impact you can have by having people who have, as they say, they understand where the shoe pinches, who can speak to exactly what the challenges that they're facing on the front lines are, and be able to help formulate the sort of policies and create the sort of enabling environment that helps continue to spur growth in that sector. It's absolutely critical that that's a voice at the table at such an occasion.
But then do you feel, in your opinion, based on what you've just said and what I just said as well, do you feel that SMEs are actually aware of this forum that's coming up?
I'm not sure that the information about it has been shared properly or effectively. Fortunately, we still have a few days before the event, so some concerted effort should go into disseminating this type of information. Some process needs to be established for selecting SMEs from across the spectrum, across different industries, not just in the urban centers, but also in the rural centers, in the semi-urban centers. The man who runs a small business in the village is just as important as the one who runs it in the city. And if you don't look after the needs of the guy running that small business in the village or semi-urban center, we are going to continue to have rural-urban migration. But if people are creating jobs in the rural areas as well, where they are facing different types of challenges from the ones we face in the urban centers, but we are running small-scale businesses, we can't just look at one and not consider the other. So, yes, the point is, a lot more should be done and very quickly to share information. A process needs to be established to select and allow SMEs to have a voice.
But then you see, the time, it's less than 2 weeks away. And right now, registration is closed. And because of the security challenges that we're having, in Abuja and the rest of it, that security is going to be tight. And so there might be challenges registering these SMEs at this point in time.
Nothing that I consider insurmountable. If we have the will to do it, it can be done.
Yeah.
In this day of information technology, if we have the will to do it, it can be done very easily.
But then, Tosin also mentioned the fact that we have about slightly over 17 million MSMEs.
Yeah.
So in the short period that we have, how many of these people can be reached? And so that we get to a situation where nobody feels that I've been neglected or relegated, or nobody thinks I'm important enough to be at that forum. And so, hey, I'm not going to be there.
But then an even bigger problem would be eliminating the opportunity for any one of those 17 million to contribute to the process. As long as, I believe that as long as there's a fair process and the opportunity for people in different sectors is there for them to come and express what their challenges are and contribute to developing policies and kind of creating that framework for growth is there. It's not necessarily about whether I'm there or he's there. It's about someone who's there who understands what SMEs are going through and can communicate that to the right sort of stakeholders.
Okay, so now looking at the whole program, what kind of synergy should we be expecting from SMEs and multinationals that, for instance, are going to be at that forum?
Okay. Well, I think both parties have opportunities to synergize, so to speak. From the multinationals or for the foreign investors, and in fact, to a large part for local investors as well, it's an opportunity to get to meet people who have business ideas that potentially could be great. Every big company started small. In fact, a lot of the major conglomerates started with an individual with an idea who had the right sort of support. I was able to grow that, and that then grows into a business that employs people, that contributes to the economy. So I think from the perspective of the multinationals, it's an opportunity to see where the opportunities are. And I think that they're very vast across different sectors. We have the critical mass in Nigeria, and we have a lot of growth sectors, and there are a couple of things that also fall into place: privatization of power, and so on and so forth. Now, for the SMEs, I think it's a chance to start to engage with people who've been down that line and can help them create the sort of structures that enable them to do business properly, that can provide the financial and technical support for them to grow, to become more than SMEs actually, and take on the mantle of growth as part of their agenda.
But also, looking at the situation we're in, do you think we have enough synergy among SME operators here in Nigeria?
No. Unfortunately, most of us SME operators are still working in silos.
Wow.
We still do business, we still like to do our own thing. I think it's a bit of a cultural thing, which we are gradually overcoming. The typical mindset a few decades back is, it's my business and I want to run it. Every other person is a competitor. Now we are going beyond that. We are learning to move beyond that. So the next man who runs his own small corner shop is not just your competitor, but could also be your collaborator. The two of you can share services, the two of you can share ideas to make life easier, make your businesses grow faster, make it a lot more profitable. All of this is just beginning to happen in our local environment. And I'm not sure that we are doing it. We are pursuing this path simply because we have become very smart. I think it's the forces in the market and the common challenges that we face every day that is becoming the glue that's binding us together gradually. So we need a lot more synergy, we need a lot more collaboration, and it's only when we achieve that we can have one strong voice that the government, policymakers, and other people, including investors, cannot ignore. Right now, the relationship between a lot of people, for example, the financial institutions and SMEs, is essentially exploitative. Essentially. But that's because SMEs relate with the financial services sector on an individual basis.
On an individual basis?
Yeah. So each SME goes to listen to what the financial service provider has to say, and you go cap in hand, and you go begging, and you go say, look, I need help, how can you help me? Which puts them in a very strong position of strength, a very high position of strength. But as we cooperate more, collaborate more, and as we form these synergies you're talking about, we'll be able to set our own standards. And the SMEs market, like Tosin has pointed out, is so large that no financial services institution can afford to ignore it.
Strong point there. Now, still talking about the financial services, we know that Africa on a whole offers a large enough market for SMEs, Nigeria inclusive. We have about 17 million and counting, could be growing every day. But then borrowing costs are still too high. What do you think is responsible for this?
A couple of things. One is that SMEs are very, by nature, intrinsically, very risky ventures. So the services provider, the financial services providers are usually very worried, and that risk, which they count to be higher, is one of the factors that forces them to raise the bar when it comes to lending rates. They are trying to mitigate and manage that risk. So they charge more because it's more risky. The other part is that on our own as SMEs operators, we approach the issue of sourcing for funds the wrong way. We have not yet all learned that there is a process, there is a system that one should follow. There are front-end preparations you should make. There are certain records you should learn to keep and maintain. There is a way to position yourself as an SME operator to make your business a lot more attractive to a financial services provider or to a lender. And if you don't do all of those things and you just stand at the street corner and cry foul, nobody is willing to give me money, I'm a small business operator, it doesn't make sense. I've never seen any loan application form where one of the fields or criteria for assessing an applicant says, help me, I'm in need. It doesn't exist in any of those forms. Instead, they are looking for things like what's your turnover, what's your revenue, do you have a proper board in place, are you answerable to anybody? If we give you this money, how sure are we that your governance system will stop you from going to go buy a brand new car next? or marry a new wife, for example.
So which is the reason why we see a high death of small businesses these days, because of that risk factor. They're not ready to put down the right criteria for the necessary loans that they're supposed to be collecting from the financial, from the banks or lenders of any sort.
For some of us, we are just ill prepared. We are just ill prepared. Some of us are also a bit lazy about it. We think that having a good product idea or a good service idea that's viable in the market is all you need to run a business successfully. I'm sorry, but no. It takes a lot more than that.
And to just buttress that point, even with foreign investment, that is what they're looking for. They're critical elements that anybody who wants to invest in a company will look for. You know, obviously a good corporate governance framework, the right sort of structures in place, and good management. So people who are good business managers. And a lot of times that's missing. That's an area that SMEs need to work on to improve, to position themselves effectively for the sort of funding that they need to grow.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break. Let's catch our breath and we'll come back. We'll talk about SMEs, where they are right now, post-rebasing, and the fact that we're now the 26th largest economy in the world and the largest in Africa. But Nigeria's growth strategies can definitely be more inclusive. And how can this happen with the SMEs? So let's take a quick break and come back to that. You're still watching Business Morning on Channels Television, and we're broadcasting live from Lagos, Nigeria. On the program today, our focus is on the small and medium enterprise and micro small and medium enterprise, and of course, how inclusive growth can be gotten from this sector. We'll be right back.